So we really are pushing toward that social studies aspect at Miller Middle School. And then at the high school, we're also serving the majority of our students that have, I would say, our long-term English learners, again, in that co-teaching model for supporting their developments in the science and the social studies areas.
So what do you do with newcomers at the middle school and high school level?
So the newcomers still have situated, targeted placements in terms of language development as well. At Miller Middle School, they would have their homeroom teacher or their WIN teacher would be assigned as an English learner teacher, and she would use their time in order to work towards language development, or he would, their ESL teacher, during that WIN and that homeroom time. And then they're also situated with a co-teaching assignment as well. So they get a double burst. They get that ESL instruction during WIN, and then they have the co-teaching available also in terms of social studies.
But when's that short period where they're doing a whole lot of different study hall stuff? So
And they would have English language development at Miller.
every day?
There's an opportunity for that. Yes, I can't tell you if those teachers deliver that on a daily basis, though.
It's an A-B block schedule.
And that's it, and they would have their assignment every day for that. I don't have the data in front of you either to talk about like what those numbers are and who they're long-term, which ones are long-term, which ones are newcomers. I will tell you that more often than not, they're long-term English learners.
Yes.
They're not
You don't get a lot of
newcomers. Yeah.
no. We aren't getting a lot of newcomers. I mean, a lot of our students are coming in as second generation now, aren't they?
I don't have the birth populations in front of me, like birth countries, to be able to like verify that in terms of second generation pieces of it, but.
I wonder if we should continue the presentation.
Yeah,
And then
let's
we'll do
continue,
questions
yeah.
at the end.
Okay, where's I at? Okay, so the next part is showing the story of proficiencies. So besides students growing toward proficiency, this is not a factor in the student performance profile or the Iowa school profile, school accountability.
They were formerly known as the Iowa School Report Card, and I
Okay.
think that is what's
Okay.
easy to know what we're discussing,
Yeah.
but then they shifted over to the performance profile.
But we're also always looking at what percent of our students did attain full English proficiency, and then those students exit the program, of course. So that's a historical line that is there with you. District is blue, Iowa is red as well. And we're, again, leaping up to meet Iowa. We had fallen in COVID, and we fell harder than Iowa did. And we're on the rebound and closing that gap. We still haven't quite met the proficiency in Iowa. Again, we have a unique population of English learners. 10.5% of our students are able to meet that proficiency threshold, whereas in Iowa, they would have about 11.38% students. And that was the data from 2022. If you fast forward one more screen,
One more slide. There it is.
there you go. Then you show that we came in this year about 10.4% of our students showing proficient. Iowa slid a little bit to 11.1% of their students showing proficiency. Breakdown of that is across grade levels for you. Those greens draw your attention to those grade levels that were above the percent proficiency in terms of Iowa in our students that are proficient. A few things I wanted to just highlight that I believe are making a difference and are on their way toward really greatness is that celebration of English proficiency. I just wanted to bring that cute group photo in front of you as well again. And there's a back row of high school students in there too. But we had about half of our students in attendance at that English Learners Celebration. And we have that scheduled again for this year coming up. And we're going to still keep that at the MHS Auditorium. I mentioned earlier that we're working on the Orpheum Welcome Center in terms of really targeting that communication and hitting that parent education opportunities with our families that we're seeing there. And then we're also building those community resource connections and well underway at signing students up and connecting parents with CAPS and MICA for that agency support that our families really need as well. And then a little bit of a conversation on the ELL teachers. We're experiencing a lot of low turnover, so we're really able to keep that experience level pretty high with our ESL teachers. Unfortunately, we have 4 openings that we're not satisfied at this point in time. MHS did go ahead and staff for more English learner teachers, but they just still have one opening that they aren't able to satisfy. So they did go up for how many teachers they had overall in count for teachers, but not as high as we wanted them to be situated at. And that was some of the work that was made out of their decisions coming out of the continuous improvement process, that they wanted to really focus on the English learner teachers and getting more staff up to that.
We've also transitioned a ELL teacher at Hoagland from EL to kinder, anticipating a larger kindergarten class, and we want to make sure that we maintain and keep those kindergarten classes at 21, 22, which was a difficult decision, knowing that we had openings with EL teachers already in the district, and yet that kindergarten class size is also essential. So with the staffing shortages, we really are just put into some really tough decisions. And that was one that we just made recently.
And I would say she steered right toward that decision because we had her co-teaching in preschool.
Yeah. Actually, you saw her in that TK classroom.
Yeah.
If you came to that Hoagland visit. So she's really excited about the change. Next slide. Is that it?
That's the last
That's it.
slide.
Oh, that's
Yes.
it. Oh, my goodness.
Questions from anybody?
So the openings, is there still an ELL teacher there, or is, there's multiple teachers? Okay.
Yep. We have 2 teachers there
Okay.
at this point in time, and then Heather would be the 3rd. And so we're looking at options for staffing. If we can't get a full-time teacher still, looking at some other options in terms of full-time sub or.
Yeah, we held an interview today. We're doing everything we can to try to fill these holes. And I would say I just want to commend Rachel. She does a nice job really looking and monitoring from a database system. So thinking through the lens of what are our ratios of ELL students to teacher at every building, and always thinking from that district lens. So I really appreciate her putting together the data, and celebrating our students, of course, that have exited EL services. But in general, we need to fill these 4 open positions and with some rock star teachers so that we can continue serving our kids.
Well, and I want to commend Rachel again publicly for the event that was held on the last day of school. Was probably one of the neatest student celebrations that I've seen. And I mean, the kids that were there were thrilled to have graduated, and their parents were super excited as well, because I'm assuming many of them, haven't or may never, reach English proficiency per se. It was also our first effort to launch the ILA device. Is that right, ILA? Did I get it right?
Isla.
ILA. I like to call it ILO, which is a technology device that Rachel used when she spoke, and 138 different languages were able to be translated on people's phones instantaneously, which was really cool. And, helped us prepare for using it at graduation as well. So.
Yep, and we used it today at the Welcome Center.
Nice. Good. Can we get invited next year too?
What's that?
Can we get invited to the event next year?
Of course. We actually have it planned, so we can invite you now.
I didn't hear about it until after. I'm like, oh.
So do you find that you have, because I'm thinking about how you do your data, because once they become proficient, they're dropped from your data.
Yeah.
So your young students who tend to catch on to second languages
Right.
quickly, they get drops, and then sometimes at the secondary level, what we're seeing are the kids who really struggle to catch on to that second language.
Yeah, are long-term English learners, and what goes into them being long-term English learners is very complicated for every student, right?
Right.
You're talking about attendance, you're talking about lots of different factors that really
Frustration.
have played into their journey.
Okay. It's a little bit different when you're thinking about how your data is shifting constantly. Or the students that you're taking tests on, the data's not shifting. The
Right.
students are.
We do monitor the performance of our English learners who have exited. So that is another component that we have.
Well, that would be interesting to see.
It might feel similar, Jan, comparative to special ed when you exit a student, if that makes sense. So if we were constantly monitoring the student achievement of special education students, well, the students that are above grade level aren't going to need academic
Right.
goals, and they don't need to be
And then their
on
exit, it would be
IEPs.
nice to know how they do after they exit too.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do I stay? What's next here?
Next
Yes,
is-
I will.
Yeah.
All right. I'm excited to welcome Kayla McCall, our district attendance coordinator, and she has been really busy this summer helping not only at our Welcome Center, but really connecting with families about chronic absenteeism. So take the wheel here, Kayla.
This is just you guys are probably already familiar with chronic absenteeism, so I'll keep it brief, but this is just a refresher. Next slide, please.
Get closer to the mic or have
Yeah. I just wanted to talk briefly about what chronic absenteeism means, because it's a buzzword. It's become a buzzword, and sometimes it's hard to remember what that actually means for the individual students. I also wanted to just briefly mention the attendance works model, because that's some of the model that is going to come through in the proposed changes to the board policy. And then I was going to give you a snapshot of the district data. So chronic absenteeism, as you know, probably is missing 10% or more of instruction time. And it differs from truancy in that it counts all absences, excused, unexcused, and suspensions, whereas truancy counts only the unexcused absences. Truancy has a focus on following the rules, the legal framework. Chronic absence emphasizes academic impact of missed days and using community-based strategies and a strengths-based kind of family development approach to address. Next slide, please. So what it means for students, it means a lot. Showing up to school is obviously the most important thing that you can do to advance your formal education. So chronic absence in the early years can result in students having difficulty reading by the third grade, achieving in middle school, and graduating high school. Students living in poverty are 2 to 3 times more likely to be chronically absent, and irregular absence can actually be a better predictor of whether students will drop out before graduation than test scores. There was a study in Utah that found that chronic absenteeism in 1 year between 8th grade and 12th grade was associated with a 7-fold increase with the likelihood of dropping out. So we've borrowed a lot from Attendance Works in the work that we're doing right now with chronic absenteeism. So what works is a data-driven, comprehensive approach that begins with engaging students and families, as well as preventing absences from adding up before they fall behind academically. The key is using chronic absence data as a diagnostic tool to identify where prevention and early intervention are needed. And that explains what the work we're doing now. This is the Attendance Works model. It's the multi-tiered system of support model that they've put out. The foundational supports are for all students and families. The Tier 1 supports are for all students and families as well, but focused on attendance specifically. And then they're divided into students missing 10% to 19% of school days instructional time, and students missing 20% or more of instructional time. And you'll see this model kind of mirrored in Attendance Regulation 501.3 R2, the proposal. I won't read this to you, but it emphasizes the different tiers, and it talks about which interventions might be appropriate for each tier. It talks about positive family engagement for 10% or more of the school days and for all families. And at 10%, the students will be staffed by an attendance team. And the attendance team will review that data weekly. And at 20%, a student would be assigned a case manager. So the idea is to pull the attendance data weekly. It's a lot of data and it changes on a daily basis, but the idea is to pull the data on a weekly basis and then work the data so that you're connecting with those families and students that need the support. And this is just a district-wide sample of some of our chronic absenteeism numbers. They range from 18% at Woodbury. This was the sample from the last week of school. 18% at Woodbury all the way to 80% at MLA. So the strategy for schools is fairly straightforward. It's to engage students and parents with attendance work. It's recognizing good and improved attendance. It's monitoring that data on a regular basis and providing personalized early outreach for students who are struggling, and then developing a programmatic response to the barriers that exist. And that's all I have for you.
You have any questions for us?
Who serves on those attendance teams?
The teams vary by building, but in general, it's an SRS worker, the counselor, the school nurse, and the principal. And then I've been attending each of the team meetings on a weekly basis as well.
Any other questions?
So is this the proposed policy, or, because this is not our policy, right?
Yeah, we have revised policies that are on the agenda
Okay,
tonight.
oh,
Okay, if you don't have any other questions, I'll thank you for.
I think you're good.
All right,
Thank you.
And this next presentation will piggyback with Ron Meir and Allison Wilson.
So I'm going to tell a story too. I live in Iowa City. I'm an independent consultant, and I work with school districts all over the country. And Marshalltown gave me my very first consulting job in 1991. And over the course of the years, I was quickly counting, about 50 grants from Marshalltown that I've funded. And this is the very first time I've gotten to come and talk to the board. So thank you for inviting me. I feel like I know a lot about Marshalltown's history. So I want to talk to you about a grant today. So the grant we're going to talk about is the one that funds Kayla's position. Micah,
Hey,
Allison, is from Micah. 5 years ago, the district submitted a grant with Micah to the U.S. Department of Education called Full Service Community Schools. And there are 5 different aspects to it, one of which is attendance. And so the grant is actually coming to an end in September. And what we tried to do a little over a year ago, the thought in the grant was, particularly around the attendance piece, to transition the work from the folks funded by the grant to the district. So one of the things that we did is we met with a planning group that included administrators from all levels, included teachers, it included community partners, Theron's central office staff, and we looked at everything that was going on with attendance, the data that they just shared with you. And we went through a planning process that started it'll be 2 years ago now, this November. So it went through the school year and into last summer. And this essentially is the culmination of that plan. This is what your district members came up with and said, this is what we think we can do that will make a difference to chronic absenteeism. So I don't know, the data went by pretty quickly. About 30% of your students miss 10 or more days of instruction. And the research is really clear that if you miss that much instruction, you really are at risk. And so when you think, right before I got here, you were sharing a lot of academic performance data. They're very directly tied. This is a logic model that we've put together that summarizes it. And one of the ways I hope you use this as board members is, first of all, to let you know what it is that the district is planning to do. But it's a tool, I'm not sure Theron will be thrilled that I'm going to say this, where you can come back from time to time and ask questions of the folks. Hey, are these things happening? Because they think these are pretty good things to make a difference. So if you notice at the top, it's a big problem. We've got 30% of your district, which is pretty high, and very typical, like the rest of the districts in the country, it goes up as they get older. So when kids get car keys and other things, the amount of absenteeism goes up. I think if you look at the assumptions section, what's really important, Kayla mentioned this idea about talking about truancy and chronic absenteeism. So when you look at the research, it doesn't matter what reason a kid missed. So if the kid went on a college visit, if they had an excused absence, they missed instruction. And if you aren't there for the instruction for any reason, it makes a difference. And so when you look at these assumptions, the district has said, we buy that thought that 10% of the time is too much, and we know they're at risk. The other thing that is hard in Iowa is that the state asks you to report attendance data based on average daily attendance, which is not a very good number because you don't know. You could have 95% average daily attendance, but it could be the same kids missing over and over. So it tells you nothing about how serious the problem is. And so having your data system, being able to call that data up and let folks see at the building levels, that's really important. I was just looking at an update from AttendanceWorks, and a piece of data that stuck with me is that if school is about to start, if kids miss 2 to 4 days in September, the likelihood that they will be chronically absent is extremely high, and pretty early on. And so when you look through this plan, I think what the district did a good job of doing is trying to think about this in a prevention way. What can we do before they get to that place? It was also very interesting, they were talking earlier about the mental health services and the need for, one of the things that they weren't so successful with is getting coaching for staff, and how that's going to be a big piece this year. That's a piece of this as well. You asked who's on the attendance teams. One of the things you'll see in here is, I think Marshalltown is like every other district in the country. Every building tends to do it their own way, and what this plan is supposed to help folks do is have a common way, a common set of people who are on that team, a common number of times they meet, a common agenda, what they talk about, common data that they look at, so that there is a common approach across the district to try to tackle this process. And the way this is laid out, as you can see, there's things that will happen at the district level. You're mentioned in here, so one of the things that should happen this year is you should get some training on what does this look like and what can boards do. Central office staff, what can they do as well? At the building level, that's really where all the work happens. And this is essentially a job description for managing attendance at the building level, what they need to do. You can see a lot of things are there. There are staff in place to deal with this. There's a district staff person who's funded for this year, possibly next year, depending on how things go with the grant. And then it becomes something that that's a nice thing that the grant can do. The important thing is, and Kayla mentioned this, you see I tried to bold some of these items, that not only will it be a team at the building level, but there's a team at the district level to look at the data and say, gosh, things are going well here, not so well there. What's the story behind that, and how do we get this better? At the end of the day, we want families, we have a law in Iowa that says if you don't come, you're going to go to the county attorney. But if you get to the place where you have to refer to the county attorney, it's way too late. And so this really has to be an approach that we try to prevent that from happening so that we never have to have that conversation with the county attorney. But as you look through this after today, I really would suggest, that you come back and every once in a while say, tell us how this is going. How are we doing? What are you learning at the district level about it? What are we seeing? Which buildings are having success? And who's been trained? And is that coaching happening? So you can help keep this on the front burner by asking those questions. So this is the culmination of this 5-year project. One piece of it, I think it's a really good thing. The district really has embraced taking this on. And I know that Micah as a partner is here to help them not only through the transition, but afterwards. So this is what that team came up with, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the plan. If you see anything that gives you pause or makes you wonder something.
Who's on the district attendance team? Who makes that up?
We've had, well, historically, as far as the planning team went, it's been a collection of building and district administrators, school resource specialists have been pretty highly engaged. I think we've had a few counselors that were
Need a nurse.
school nurse, yeah. And we tried to get relatively equitable representation at high school, middle, intermediate, and elementary in that committee as well. Since that planning time, of course, Kayla's been hired, which has been a huge asset in the short amount of time she's been here. We've also, for over a year or two, been attempting to hire attendance specialists for each of the buildings thus far. We've only been able to successfully hire 2, I believe, for the high school.
So my question is,
Sure.
is this the plan that we're putting in starting now?
So this is what came as a result of the planning session, and this is what you guys have to work with. I know that ever since Kayla came on, she's met with Theron, she's met with you, kind of gone through this, said this is where we are. So this is the beginning. And in a sense, you could think of this as Kayla's job description, that anything on here, and obviously you can't do all of these things in 1 year. So, I think the next step probably will be that they'll go through this and they'll say, all right, these are the 3 or 4 or 5 things that are imperative to happen this coming year that we want to get done well. And I know part of that will be making those teams consistent, making what they talk about, giving them easy access to the data. In the past, it's always been hard because you had to spend a lot of time sort of pulling the data together, and that gave you less time to talk about it. But having Infinite Campus be able to get that out so that the principals, as they're part of those building teams, can really ask questions about what is it. I will tell you, your big challenge is going to be like in other districts. It's hard to have this be attendance absences for any reason, because we are so used to saying, oh, but that's excused, that's excused, that's excused. And while that's what gets reported to the state and you have to track that, it really is about our students learning. And if they're not here, they can't learn it. So helping the community, helping families embrace that, helping teachers embrace that, because when you look at the numbers that way, they look worse, but it's a representation of they didn't get to hear what the teachers had prepared.
Well, one of the issues we run into as educators is the reasons kids are gone, and it's
Right.
not always under their control, and sometimes it's not even under the family's control.
Right.
They need someone for childcare so that mother can go to work, so the
Right.
older kids are
Oh.
taking turns staying home with the younger kids.
Mm-hmm.
The family's got to go out of the country for a funeral, so they're gone for a month.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these things are difficult for families to control.
Right.
And so yes, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
When you get down to the implementation stage, that's where it's difficult.
But you also think about, and in other districts, a challenge comes up around, and this is where it's hard, because you want kids to be involved with lots of activities, but if I miss every Friday for an event, I'm gone for half or all of the day,
Right.
and then I'm sick, or I got the flu or something, and now I've missed 20 days
Well,
of
yeah.
instruction, and all for good reasons. It's that conversation around how to, it's like, we talk about, we don't want to have subs in the classroom because it's the classroom teacher who delivers that really great instruction, and while there's a sub there, it's not the same. We want to minimize that, so we want to minimize absences for any reason.
Right.
Because we want those, at the end of the day, we want the number of kids who graduate and prepared to go on to be productive adults to be high.
Well, I agree with
Yeah,
you. It's
yeah.
just, yeah.
The school resource specialists are, when we expanded them from a few years back, being half-time at each elementary school or being shared between 2 to full-time, half of their time was intended to be devoted to attendance and addressing chronic absenteeism. And then where we see the largest percentages of absences is at the secondary level, maybe starting in the intermediate into the middle school. And so that's where we feel that in a perfect world, we would be able to hire attendance specialists, and those two groups of employees can really work at building relationships with those families and trying to get down to, what is the true root cause of these absences, and hopefully the earlier that we can get them addressed, the easier it'll be to turn the corner on that.
And Kayla mentioned that what's really important about the attendance works approach is that instead of only dealing with the kids who are absent, they're putting in things that are for everybody. So prevention things where you celebrate good attendance, do other kinds of things to promote attendance, really helping families understand. For a lot of families, they just don't know that if they miss that much, it's a bad thing, and even that can make a difference. But also doing some things in that, some group interventions or some early intervention, and then still having that tier piece. So just like your MTSS systems, there are tiers of support around this.
Well, what I could see being helpful with doing this year, and actually trying to do as much of everything on here as we could, is that then your building teams are meeting weekly. And they're talking about each individual student that's missing these days and why they're missing. By the end of the year, you're going to have pretty solid data on, are they missing due to daycare?
Right.
And if they're missing due to daycare, would it make sense to maybe start the elementary school a little bit earlier than the middle school so that your older kids can drop those younger kids off?
that's a
You can
really
get those
good
kind
point.
of system-wide interventions in.
Because you want to move from doing a kid-by-kid basis to being able to find some systemic interventions.
Right.
So if you gather and collect that data well, and you bring that back to the conversation, that's why I think the district team is so important, because they can start to look for some of those themes and trends, and what can we do that might, as a system, help us with this problem, that we don't have to do kid by kid by kid.
So this policy is for when they get to 10%. So is there a preventable program before that? Like, when you start seeing it go up there, like, or is the SRA going to jump in, or the secretary, is that the?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes, so the idea is that after every absence, there'll be a contact from the school, but that Infinite Campus, for example, will flag, and we get to a certain amount, we're going to get you to the attendance team.
Okay.
A few more, you're going to get a case manager.
So they don't wait till the 10%?
Yes,
Yeah.
right. I mean, it'd be ideal, and again, it's always about time, that, if we know, for example, missing 10% of September is a pretty good predictor. If we could get on those kids
Yeah.
right and get them hooked, and we'll never know what we prevented, but we know that right now it's about 30% of the kids.
Yeah.
And I think actually in the data, I could be wrong about this, but I think if they leave the district, for example, they go to Mexico or go someplace, after a certain number of days, they're unenrolled.
Drop.
And so then they come off this list. So
Right.
these numbers could potentially, I don't know how that works, or how, if you guys,
Yeah,
the
it's,
state has them drop the folks.
even this school year, we've changed the way that we do that. We have kind of figured out what we call a soft drop, which means we are still maintaining record of attendance, which is really important for us then on the backside when we're tracking chronic absenteeism.
Right.
We used to.
Right. And the state doesn't ask for it in that
Right.
way, so I'm glad that you guys, I know that was part of the conversation. I'm
Right.
glad you've started that.
But it is really important to remember, we have families who do leave for a substantial amount of time, and they miss, if they've missed anything outside of that family trip, they're chronically absent.
Right.
That was my next question, because I know they were dropped, and that was affecting identifying chronically absent students, because they start fresh when they come back.
And that's
So-
a good example of the team having had some conversation and thinking through what can we do differently to really get a handle on this.
Oh, Kayla is still here. She is. She has done a wonderful job this summer calling families that have had repetitive or patterns of chronic absenteeism. And I just want to thank you for your patience while you're making those phone calls. She's always really compassionate and just an open listening ear to every single situation. And I don't want to pigeonhole us into, it's this one reason,
Right.
if that makes sense. Like, Kayla can probably be a witness to the fact that we've had a lot of different reasons
There's
come
lots of
through
different
for the
reasons.
chronic absenteeism.
Now, are there students that either have an illness or go on vacation? I know they can take their Chromebook and do some work. Are those being counted absent too, even if they're doing work at home?
Yes, and we're not noticing that they actually do work.
Okay, good. Okay. I know that was an option, so I didn't know if there was actual evidence that they
few
were doing.
students
Oh,
do.
okay. Okay, that doesn't count.
I think that would be a good conversation for the next update, is to say, let's look at what are those reasons? How many fit that definition? How many are another definition? What is the story behind where we are? And do we start to see some some ways that we might do something about it? Or is it not what we anticipate? Because we probably think it's a lot of those families, and it would be a very good question.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. We don't always really know.
Yeah.
We do know, because as a teacher, I've put together many of those packets, and I've done many of the online things. And you're right, very few students do it, or they do a little tiny bit of it.
Great. Any other questions about this?
Good job.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Ron.
Legislative priorities.
Yeah, so this is the time of year where I bring forward for your consideration recommendations for the upcoming year for our district legislative priorities to submit to the Iowa Association of School Boards and to talk over with our area legislators. The recommendations I'm bringing forward to you are not new ones, and that in some way, shape, or form, all of these have been part of our priorities over the last 6 or 7 years. Number one would, of course, be student achievement, and this is going to be a particular interest as we continue to work with the state, particularly as it relates to the report card and trying to provide the necessary supports for our schools that have been identified in need of assistance or as comprehensive schools, but also as the ESSER dollars run out by this next summer and early fall, wanting to emphasize the supports that we're going to need there to move the great work forward that we've been able to do with the support of ESSA. Sean had talked about one of those things with the accelerated learning training that was today. Second, supplemental state aid, again, critically important to be able to provide increases to our existing employees that more closely mirror the cost of living increases, which hasn't been the case most of the past decade or so. But to be quite honest, I think that also is going to have to be seriously looked at as it relates to being able to recruit and retain people into the profession, which leads into priority number 3, teacher recruitment and licensure. There have been steps taken at the state level to try to help accommodate people becoming endorsed or certified to teach various things, including even alternative endorsements for non-educators to become educators. I'm concerned that the state still hasn't recognized the crisis that we're in as far as teacher shortages and stuff. A primary example of that, when I was recently at the School Administrators of Iowa Conference, I was talking with another superintendent colleague and had indicated that we had a number of openings, one of which recently includes high school science. And that person's response to me was, well, that's now the 41st secondary science opening across the state of Iowa right now. So, I mean, we're in a crisis state as it relates to getting all of these positions filled with qualified people. It's even more difficult to ensure the highest quality of people into those positions in these circumstances. And we know that the two most important things to move the bar in student achievement, regardless of what else you do, is to have high quality people in these teaching positions and to develop them and to retain them. So anyway, I'll get off my pedestal there. And the fourth thing is mental health, of course, and we've made significant strides with being able to provide our students, our staff, and our parents with support in this regard, both through professional development as well as one-on-one and group counseling. And I want to commend Matt for his continued efforts to acquire grants in order to help continue to support that work moving forward, which we feel very confident will for at least the duration of the grant that we have. So I would recommend board approval of these 4 priorities, 3 or all 4 of which will be considered by ISB.
Any questions or comments? No, I would just, echo what you said, Dr. Schutte, about teacher recruitment, retention, licensure. If it's not a crisis yet, now we're not far from it. And I don't know what a crisis is if we're not in one, right? I mean,
It's really difficult to keep teachers when you're short-staffed because they end up covering, or the classes get huge and the job just becomes more and more difficult, and then they go elsewhere.
it's a cycle that just feeds itself.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. We need a motion to approve the 23-24 Marshtown legislative priorities.
So moved.
Second.
Wall, McGinnis, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0.
The next item hopefully will be an easy one. After 2.5 years, I think, of hard work and perseverance and working with Iowa Homeland Security and the federal FEMA people, we were very pleased to have been notified a week or so ago that our grant was approved to build a tornado-safe team room, which will be the first tornado-safe facility in Marshall County, and it's been part of the county mitigation plan for quite some time. So we have the notification and a acceptance letter that we need to have the board approve to receive the subaward of $3,458,175 towards the building of an estimated $3.9 million team room complex.
Questions or comments? I would just say, Kevin, I'm glad you're here tonight because I do want to say thank you to you for the effort and the work that you've put into getting this grant awarded. I know you've done a lot on this, and so thank you for that.
That's a lot of work.
Not that you haven't, Dr. Schutte.
Kevin's and his team are an instrumental piece, and I know that they were were persevering right along with me on this one.
So with that, is there a motion to approve the subaward agreement with Iowa Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management in order to construct a safe room at the Marshtown High School Stadium Complex in the amount of $3,458,175 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Wall, Hernandez. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0.
Randy, I'm up. I'm going to keep this short. So, Amy, do you want to pull up the presentation? Nope, the other one. I'm going to condense 56 pages down into 7 very quick slides in under 5 minutes, hopefully. So, since I was with the district the first time, one of the goals Paulette and I had was putting a standard operating procedures manual together. I think we constantly ran into hurdles that prevented that from happening, whether that be COVID, derechos, or anything else. But the last several months, the business office staff and myself have been working hard to put this together. Next slide there, Amy. So why, what is a procedures manual? It's just handling of public funds is just a serious matter that's governed by state laws and board policy. So having a resource for staff to lean on anytime that they're handling cash in the district is just a protection that's in place for them. What you'll see in the manual, it's just a reflection of current board policy, recommended best practices, and just our current past practices as well. So there's not really anything new in here. There are a couple things which I'll touch on here shortly, but this will be treated similar to handbooks where we'll review annually and update with necessary changes each year. The importance of the manual is, again, all funds that flow through the district are considered public funds. So how those funds are spent, state law and auditors require strict accounting of those funds. It's an internal controls measure, which is a responsibility of every employee. It helps protect the employees and also provides greater accuracy and tracking for the cash that flows through the district. those processes are established to protect everyone, and those practices become patterns of behavior, so it fosters that trustworthy credibility for the district. The next two slides I'm not going to touch too hard on. That's just summarizing basically what's all touched on within the manual for the most part from a high level. Cash handling, credit card procedures, general purchasing processes, travel expense reimbursements, gifts, fundraising. We're going to implement some central warehouse receiving procedures. WebLink, that's an online system that's going to allow us to, we're going to move our purchase order processing to an online system. We're going to get rid of the paper system here in the next few weeks. We also, building principals and directors can run budget reports in real time through that WebLink process, so that helps them stay on top of their individual budgets. We also will open it up this year for payroll information for employees, so if I, as an employee, instead of reaching out to the business office, I need to get my direct deposit for the last 3 years, I can log into that system, pull up my pay stub, and there it is. Same with W-2s and other tax insurance forms. And then it covers some payroll processes and just what to do in the event of injury for workman's comp. So in summary, again, it's a resource for staff that's going to outline current best practices based off of state law, board policy, auditor guidance. Think of it as a standard operating procedure that you would see at just a regular company. Like I said, everything is essentially our current policy and practices. There are only 2 new changes that we're implementing this year. Will be implementation of the online requisition system, getting rid of the paper system, and then implementing some central warehouse procedures. So all orders and packages will streamline through our warehouse. That'll help curb any potential for orders to get lost in transit. Recap that, again, all monies that flow through the district are public funds and should be spent to meet public purpose. And again, we're going to treat this similar to the handbook, so there's an acknowledgement that we'll be sending out to staff when we communicate this out for them to sign and acknowledge. I think that was under 5 minutes, so.
It is, it's a nice
You did it.
manual, I noticed that.
Any questions for me? We did review this with the Finance Committee at our July 31st meeting as well.
I appreciate the time you took to put this together. I know
Yeah,
there's a
it's
lot
a
of
lot of
work
work.
for your team, and I think it's going to help the staff out, the admins, also hold everybody accountable.
Yeah.
And I appreciate what you guys did.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Not, is there a motion to approve the business procedures manual as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Wall, McGinnis, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0. Kevin?
Yay! First of all, back on the team room, I just want to commend the board and the superintendent for not jettisoning the project. Another one of our school district clients made the decision about 9 months ago that they just couldn't wait any longer and proceeded with their project without FEMA. So it does take a little perseverance and patience to stick with it and wait for that, because it took a little more than 2.5 years to finally come to fruition. And I will be coming back to you in the future with a contract amendment that's been requested by FEMA and Homeland Security to make sure that all of the requirements that are currently in place are in our contract with you. So they've asked for that. So it'll come forward at some point. I don't know when, but sometime in the next 4 weeks, probably. So back to the current agenda. What do we have? Proposal for the site survey work for the CTE edition. We had a proposal to conduct that site survey. Clapsaddle Garber. It's really a survey on the south side of the building where the current greenhouse is, that wraps all the way around to where all of your mechanical equipment is on the east side of the high school.
So the expansion areas would be the greenhouse area, and then also the industrial arts area on the
Right.
east side.
And where the temporary classroom is that's been there for a few decades.
No longer there.
Is it gone?
Yeah,
I drove through there today and didn't notice.
Yeah, it's gone.
Okay, great.
we got the fever after we took down the two sheds at the stadium. We thought, well, let's take down
Wonderful.
that third big shed that's on the corner of the building.
Just start collecting dust.
Okay, so as soon as we have the approval, they've got a team ready to start that survey because we're in design now, so they want to get it completed as soon as possible, so we know where the utilities are and topography and so on.
Any questions for Kevin? Is there a motion to approve the proposal from Clatsettle Garber Associates for survey services for the MHS CTE edition as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Faltus Hernandez, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0. Food service design.
Okay, so there are a few different components to this. The career and tech ed, family and consumer science spaces. The food service design consultant, Clapsettle Garber, would be doing all of the design work related to equipment identification and selection for both the residential kitchen, teaching kitchen, and the commercial teaching kitchen, as well as some of the storage equipment that'll go in the pantry. So that's the biggest part of this number. There are also 2 studies that are a part of this as well, that Dr. Schutte has asked us to provide enough of a study of the existing high school kitchen to identify what is the scope of the work that may need to be done there in the future and what is the cost of that work. I believe that's $2,500 of this, or $2,800 of this number, I think.
29.
29, okay. And then a study of the Orpheum kitchen area and coffee area as well. I think that's another 1,500 for that piece. So that'll be just the study, again, defining the scope, kind of the engineering subcomponent and what that budget would be for future work.
Are there any questions?
I answered my own.
Is there a motion to approve the amendment to the professional services agreement with FEH Design for food service consultant services in a total fee amount of $46,750?
So moved.
Second.
Faltus McGinnis, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, the next item is really approval of the schematic design, that authorization to proceed with the next phase, which is design development. So just as a reminder, there's 4 phases of design: conceptual, which is really the study, then schematic design, which really defines the scope, and then design development, where we really can now pull the engineers in and do a lot of the engineering work, and then the construction and bid documents. So we've completed that first phase. I did bring 4 copies of 11 by 17s for, I know everybody gets it electronically. Some people like to hold paper. So I brought 4 copies for anybody who'd like to have this. I didn't want to make 20 copies of it, but here's 4 copies in case anybody would like to hold that and kind of review it. It is an ongoing process, and we'll be reviewing this final schematic in a meeting on Thursday with the team. And we put a budget together to see where we're at. The budget's a little bit higher than it was last time, but the scope has evolved as well. So we're asking for approval of this, the budget, and then authorization to move to the next phase.
Is similar to the stadium project where we engaged all of the varsity coaches as well as Mr. Isgrig and the planning and development to try to get the best facility for the future that we could. We've had similar engagement of all the CTE and the science teachers, and we've brought in the local business community that are relevant to the course offerings and the facilities. And it's been really interesting with CTE because probably 80% of the staff that we initially started meeting with in the spring have turned over, but many of those new staff members have been attending periodic meetings this summer so that they can become familiar with what we're looking at and help guide the design phase. And as I shared with them, you get one crack at this about every 60 years, so. So dream big as we're doing the planning.
Yeah, so we've been very happy that those teachers are willing to spend some time with us. When we have meetings, they're long meetings, so.
Questions, comments?
So what are we trying to approve the design, or, I'm not sure, I'm trying to understand what stage we're at
Basically
here.
approving the schematic design phase, which basically defines the scope of the work that is happening, and then authorizing us to proceed with the next phase, design development.
Okay, so you're not actually building anything yet, you're just
No.
still developing, okay.
No, the next phase is design development, and then when design development is complete, we'll update the budget again, which will be more accurate because we'll have the engineering systems
Right.
better defined. And we'll ask for authorization to complete the construction documents that are used for bidding. And if we continue on that timeline, we'll be coming back to you in early November for approval to issue, I believe it's November 9th, to bidders to give you pricing. And then once the pricing's back, then you have a big decision to make.
Okay. So at this point, we're not spending a lot of money, we're just trying to say,
Correct.
this is where we, okay. Okay, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
Seems like-
And our timelines are purposely going to be similar for the team room project as well as the CT and science lab renovations, having two projects of these magnitudes happening at the same time. I think the timing is already going to be very advantageous towards competitive bidding, but we could have a lot of interest based on those two things happening.
We are implementing some strategies that will mean pre-purchasing some mechanical equipment, just like we did on the last project with some Lennox equipment, and issuing early documents to bid some of the team room components, like the emergency generator, which right now has a 2-year lead time, and some other electrical equipment. So we'll be coming back to you to ask you to commit to some of those dollars before you have all the bids. So again, those are tough decisions because you don't know what the total cost is going to be. But if by chance you ended up with an electrical transformer and an emergency generator, they're going for a lot of money right now, so it wouldn't be a bad investment. But we'll cross that bridge here in about 6 weeks to talk about some of those early purchases and early bid packages.
And we did that on the stadium relative to the scoreboard as well.
Right.
Having experienced a 6-month lead time on the swim video scoreboard, we didn't want to run into that same problem with the stadium complex.
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve the schematic designs and budget opinion presented and authorize FEH to proceed into the design development phase of the project as presented?
So moved.
Second.
McGinnis, Faltus, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0. Thanks, Kevin.
I'll just
Are you
stay
still
here
sticking around
a
for this
little
one?
while.
It's related.
There's a couple.
There's a couple that are related, yeah. So for the next one, questions, how are we going to finance the projects? As we've discussed previously, the intent is to issue save revenue bonds for the financing of this project. So if you recall, last month we had a public hearing for approximately 10 million. That was based off of some preliminary budget numbers that Kevin and his team had put together back in May, June timeframe for us. With some of the new laws that are in place, when we're issuing revenue bonds, we're still required to hold a public hearing, give the public a chance to petition for those projects if they would prefer to see that go to a vote, because with revenue bonds, you don't have to put that on a vote unless you get petitioned by the community. In that event, the community has 14 days, and then with the new law changes, you can only do elections in November. So that is the reasoning that you're seeing this on the agenda tonight after getting the updated budget numbers from Kevin and his team, as well as then getting awarded the FEMA grant, and having discussions along with the updated budget numbers for the CTE project, as well as the cost not covered by the FEMA grant for the Tornado Safe Room project. And speaking with Dr. Schutte and speaking with the Finance Committee last week, we came up with roughly an additional $3 million over that $10 million that we had the public hearing for last month. And speaking with our financial advisor at Piper Jaffray, he informed me that the law states that we would need to do a public hearing for that additional difference. So that's the Cliff Notes version, I guess, for the item that you see in front of you now, is to set a public hearing for August 21st, so that in the event we are petitioned, we still can meet that timeline for the November election.
Questions?
We're only talking about the three, we're not talking about who we'd award 3 million to, correct?
Correct. So what we'll do later in the year, I'm working with Piper, I said Piper Jaffray, that's who they used to be, it's Piper Sandler.
Yeah.
We're gonna be working later in the year to issue some bonds. We're talking through some different options, because even with $13 million total, that is a small enough amount to where we can get what's called bank qualified bonds with that. So there's some private placement that can happen that can result in lower interest rate and interest savings for us. But with the way the bank qualified works, you can only do so much in a calendar year. So we will likely split the bonds and do an issue, say sometime in November or December, and then turn around and do the second issue for the remaining portion of the project sometime in the spring. But yeah, we're not to the point of actually issuing the bonds yet, but that'll be coming here in the next few.
This would just be to set a public hearing.
Right.
Perfect.
Yep.
We're not saying we're using pipe.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, we're not there yet. Right.
Okay, perfect.
We're giving the public a chance to weigh in on this.
Correct.
Any other questions?
How many classrooms, I'm trying to see if I can find it, does it add to the high school?
So the courtyard itself will hold 3 new science labs and the new commercial teaching kitchen. And then there will also be a new greenhouse on the south side of the building, which you could consider a classroom. And then there's an addition to the technical education component that really provides 2 new classrooms there. And then we're really renovating 90% of the lower level of the east side of the high school, all those shop spaces and the classroom spaces, except for some of the pre-existing things that we really aren't touching for other programs.
Peer program
Peer
spaces
program,
wouldn't be
yeah.
renovated.
Right, and the Project Lead the Way lab down there on the north side, we're not touching that. So maybe it's 7 new classrooms and then updating 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, plus 4 labs, 17.
So will that courtyard, it's just the bottom level, right? It doesn't, it won't be a top level?
It's just a 1-story,
Story.
so it'll be an exposed roof
Oh.
from the second floor.
Just trying to read all this black and white.
That's why I brought these nice
Visualizing it.
drawings.
It's really
That should help.
a very big project.
It's very.
It is. I mean, we're updating, we're gonna have basically 9 new science labs. And That's one of the reasons why the number has increased substantially from what we were previously envisioning.
Is there a motion to set a public hearing? What am I doing? Motion to approve the resolution tentatively approving the plan specifications. No, am I off on one? I'm on 604. I was reading 605. Thank you, Randy. Motion to approve a resolution to set a public hearing on the proposed issuance of approximately an additional $3 million of school infrastructure, sales, services, and use tax revenue bonds for August 21, 2023 at 5 PM as presented.
Move for approval.
Second.
Hernandez Faltis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, now we're on
Now the next one.
605.
And yeah, this is to what Kevin referenced earlier with breaking out the HVAC equipment for the project, similar to what we did with the scoreboard for the stadium complex project. So we'll be looking to set a public hearing also on August 21st for that portion of the project.
Any additional questions about this? Or Kevin, anything else you want to share about this?
Nothing additional. I mean, we're going to try and direct purchase some equipment through Lennox. Once it's designed, we are in the schematic design phase of this as well. So the design development phase, we're moving this one at a little faster pace because of the long lead times for equipment.
Questions?
So this would be the same date and same time? And they're still basically looking for public input on this project?
Yep.
Yeah, so moved.
Second.
McGinnis, Wall, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0.
So I know this feels like a little bit of kicking the can down the road since this has been on the agenda in June, July, and now August. We are hopefully really close to having mutual agreement on a lease agreement with Alliant Energy in order to convert in an effort to eventually convert Bicentennial Park property that we own to a solar field. So our attorney Connor Wasson from Allers is doing one final review of the lease agreement that we've been negotiating with them, as well as all the other documents that he had been trying to receive for months and finally received within the last week or two. So I'm fairly confident that we should be in a position to have the public hearing at the next board meeting and actually have a lease agreement that hopefully the board can approve. And so the next item would be setting the public hearing for that board meeting at our next board meeting on Monday, August 21st.
Any questions about this? Then is there a motion to approve the resolution fixing the date for a public hearing on the proposed lease agreement with Interstate Power and Light Company for August 21, 2023 at 5 PM?
So moved.
Second.
Faltis, Hernandez,
Yes.
all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0.
We've got a lot of things going on at that public hearing.
It's going to be a busy day.
It is.
The next item, I'm very happy to bring forward to you a recommendation, and it's in regards to our beloved colleague, B. Niblock. B, as you're well aware, spent 49 years of her life as an Iowa public school educator, as a teacher, and as a principal, 25 years in Marshalltown as both a principal at Anson Elementary School and then a board member for 2 terms here in Marshalltown. There's no question that her passion was unwavering for doing what was in the best interest for students. In fact, the poster, I believe, that's hanging yet on the wall there, Is It Good for Students, was, I think, driven by her as it related to, at the end of each of our board meetings, as many of you will remember, the question was, what have we done for students? And that legacy continues on with Sean asking that question as well. The Orpheum Welcome Center, when that idea came forward from the communication marketing audit that we had INSPRA do, that was right up Bee's alley. And Bee was super, super excited, though she was nearing the end of her tenure, in hopes that that facility would come to fruition, because she absolutely knows how important it is for our new families and our existing families to have that kind of support all in one place for getting kids and families acclimated not only to the district but potentially to the community as well. B, in an anonymous way, has been a significant contributor to startup funds as it's related to the Orpheum Theater the last couple years. And she has also made a significant pledge upon her passing, which we hope does not happen for some time, towards seeing and providing support for Marshtown High School graduates pursuing post-secondary education. And because of both of those things, her time, effort, and talents that have been committed to this district, and the significant financial support and help that she has and will continue to make for years to come, I am recommended that the board consider and would be asked to approve at the next board meeting that we would name the Welcome Center portion of the Orpheum the B.A. Niblock MCSD Orpheum Welcome Center.
Good idea.
Does anybody have any questions or comments or anything?
I think it makes sense. It's a good idea.
Do we have to keep the Orpheum name there, or is there?
I think for historical purposes as well as just as a landmark point of reference, it would be wise to keep the Orpheum.
I'm not against
Yeah,
it. I just thought
name in
it's
it.
pretty long.
No, I would say it's a well-deserved honor for Bee. Her gifts are no longer anonymous. I hope she's aware of that now.
Yes, this is true.
I had to seek her permission at least to share what I've shared.
And I would hope that she would be honored and she would be excited about it, so.
Yeah. So that would come forward to you at the next board meeting for
Right.
formal approval.
It was discussion only for this evening, but it sounds like everybody is pretty well in favor of it, so bring it back next time. And that brings us to everyone's favorite part of the meeting, policies.
Yeah, thanks.
Everyone except Kevin.
Okay, so.
Do you want to start with all of yours, Theron, and then I'll do mine?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that would work. I'll probably have,
Or whoever, yeah.
I can walk through some of these and either Nora or Shauna can help if I need the support. But the first one, 310.4, the organizational chart. This chart was revamped significantly prior to my arrival 8 years ago, and all we are looking to do is to update that chart based on new positions that have been created during that period of time, or new titles, even more so than new positions of existing positions, and trying to make sure to firm up proper organization in terms of supervision of positions like auditorium manager, which has existed for a long time, but kind of floated between different people kind of being responsible for supervising that and stuff. We've had new positions created within the ranks of technology, and also within the business office as well. And so the recommendations here, and Nora's done a great job of outlining them as well so that you can see them, would be what we'd like adopted at the next meeting to more accurately reflect our current state as it relates to our district level positions. And then we've got a series of policies that Kayla, who I think left, has worked closely with Shauna, with David Stanfield, with myself in order to retool existing policies to reflect our future state as it relates to attendance. So 501.3, compulsory attendance, which we will change the title to enrollment in compulsory attendance, helps people understand the difference, kind of as she illustrated in her presentation today. 501.3E1, attendance requirements, helps to streamline the language and reduce redundancy that was in the existing language. 501.3E2, attendance regulations, really emphasizes the definition of chronic absenteeism within that from our work with Attendance Works. Cleans up a lot of the language to be a little bit more concise and understandable. 501.9, student absences excused. A lot of that was just clean up, reordering of information that existed. And then 501.10, truancy, unexcused absences, very similar. Clarified truancy, including what the consequences were for potential consequences for truancy. Removed out of school suspension as a possible consequence. That would be kind of counterproductive to having kids come to school. So all of those would return to you for a first reading at the next meeting, because there's been significant changes made there.
Any questions about that 501 series or the org chart?
I do. Kayla made reference to 501.3R2 and said those were proposed changes about chronic absenteeism. I don't see R2 on the list. I see E2.
E2.
And that does not have any information in it about chronic absenteeism.
Yeah, that's more of an exhibit, so we'll have to double check that. We may just have neglected to put one in there that needed to be, but it'll come before you at the next meeting, because we'd like them all to be captured, obviously, at the same time.
My second question is 501.9. Students no longer have to attend school at all if they want to participate in sports. Is that true?
Well, they could be homeschooled, dual enrolled, for example.
But if they miss the day of school and are enrolled?
If they miss the day of school, they should not be participating in an activity.
That's struck from the policy.
Yeah, we'll double check that one too.
Just more.
Ooh, good.
Typically,
Good catch, Sam.
historically, they've
I
had
like
to
that.
at least been at school for the second half of the day in
It
order to
said full day
participate.
or half day and they're struck.
Okay.
I wish she were here because I know she tried to take away repetitive.
And maybe it's in something else.
She might have found it somewhere else and then didn't think it belonged here.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that's clear.
I think we could bring her as well on August 21st. I'll talk to her.
Sure, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Because, yeah, if that's someplace else, that's fine, but I mean, I was at the fall parent sports meeting yesterday, and it was made pretty clear that if you weren't at school on the day of the competition, you weren't going to participate in the
Right,
competition.
so that's where I'm kind of like,
Yeah.
For the sake of explaining to parents, you know, for the SRS or the attendance specialist when they're presenting the attendance policy,
That it's clear.
That
Yeah.
it's clear
And
here
I'm-
too, even if it's somewhere else, I think.
Yeah, and it may very likely be in that regulation that's missing. 104, anti-bullying, anti-harassment policy, we've got some changes that are made primarily due to the recent legislative changes. It's also got references to the comprehensive school improvement plans, which are no longer required by the state, so that would be coming back for first reading. 213, public participation in board meetings. Again, Senate File 496 speaks to this in terms of helping to be transparent with that information relative to the website, but also then being more transparent about what it would be required to file a petition with the board. 402.2, child abuse reporting. Again, there's changes in here to reflect the definition of mandatory reporters to include employees 18 years and older, because we do on occasion have people of that age working for us, and in the past, they have not been required. 402.5, required professional development for employees. Nora, you want to help me on this one, what the change was there?
I just exited, I need to get back to it, sorry.
It's related to House File 604.
Oh, yes, yes.
So,
And mandatory training, I think.
yeah, the governor's law states that certain trainings that we require staff to take, we have to inform them of basically what law it coincides with. So for example, you have to take the mandatory reporter training, and it's because of this House file law or whatever. We have to provide them, the section of the law is what it says.
So our first day of staff being back on duty, whether it be virtual or in person, is the entire day is mandatory trainings online, essentially. So we need to share with them what law requires them to have to do that mandatory training.
And I sent the email before that law went into effect. So that was my workaround. But yeah, and I reached out to our attorney about this regulation and how we are to be using it moving forward. And, and then the trainings that we require staff take, if it doesn't coincide with a section of the law, it's a district. There's basically language that says that, we are mandating it. It doesn't come from the law. It's coming from, the district, which is a requirement of, to hold the position. So you still have to do it. It's not one of those, well, you can't point to a law, so therefore I'm not doing it. It's part of your requirement for the job. So a lot of us, and some are wondering, I guess, what the need for citing the section of the law when we as the employer still have that autonomy to dictate that, but so be it.
408.1 licensed employee professional development, very similar rationale as to why we made some adjustments to that one. 505.5 graduation requirements. This one's coming back to you because the law changed in that it's no longer required by the state to have financial literacy be a graduation requirement. But in Marshalltown, we still feel strongly that it should be part of the graduation requirement. So we had inadvertently struck it based on the legal change at the last meeting. And we want to make sure that remains in there. And then 601.1 school calendar just reflects that the new state law allows for up to 5 days or 30 hours of instruction to be provided remotely, like in the event of a weather event. Probably unlikely that we're going to take advantage of this, only because of the logistical challenges that we learned during COVID in terms of how to get devices home with elementary students that otherwise wouldn't be taking them home. So it would have to be something significant where we knew that there could be a lot of time missed over, a lot of days missed over a short period of time for us to invoke that again. But we're just going to change the policy to reflect at least the ability to do that. I don't believe that we'll probably be exercising that. Shauna may feel differently, I don't know.
Sorry, I just found out that my license has been renewed, so I'm good for the next 5 years. So I don't even know what you said.
Jeez.
We normally are. Yes.
These guys are,
I've been here.
Right on.
hey, we're all for 2 for looking for support from the gallery. All right, Sean, I'm turning it over to you.
Well, before, any questions about any of those other policies before? So with the exception of 213, which will be marked as reviewed, right? The rest of those will come back.
Correct.
Okay. So then mine, 5035, corporal punishment, mechanical restraint, and prone restraint can be marked as reviewed. There's no policy changes, just some updates to legal and cross-references. 5036, physical restraint and seclusion. Same thing, mark as reviewed, no changes to the policy itself, just some cross-reference updates. 5036 R1, no changes, that can be marked as review. 5036 E1, use of physical restraint and seclusion documentation form, can be marked as reviewed. There are no changes, just some updates to legal and cross-references. 5036 E2, debriefing letter to guardian of student involved, mark as reviewed. There are no changes to the policy, just some updates to legal and cross-references. And the same with 503.6 E3, debriefing meeting document, mark as reviewed. There's no policy changes. So if we just would have had my policies, we'd have been in the clear. But we had all the other ones that have to come back next time. With that, we're at reminders. Next board meeting is August 21st. Leah will have initial review policies. And then, yeah, that's it for review, for reminders, I guess. This is as good a time as any. We need to do our annual board self-evaluation. So in the next couple of days, I will send that out to everybody so that you can complete that, get it back to me, and then we can review that and work on our goal setting, both superintendent and board goals in the next few weeks. Any items for future agendas that anyone would like to hear? What have we done this evening to improve education for the students in Marshalltown?
Seems like we're working on some pretty major renovations of the high school.
I like how the attendance has been laid out.
I do too. This looks like
Very
a good
easily
plan.
can be read by anybody. It's not everywhere, it's all in one, so this is a really nice form. And
Yes, it is.
the change of the attendance policy, I think that's going to be good and clear for parents to understand.
I think it was nice. It's always nice to hear, or good to hear Rachel's annual Help 21 report on, English learners and are they making growth and are they graduating out of the EL program. I also, we had the work session at 5, and that's a mixed bag of data, right? I mean, there's some good, there's some not so good. But I think it's important to hear. And now it's, what are we going to do about it, right? So
It's also nice to see the support of the community, like donating a flagpole. That's just like so random, but it's so needed.
Yeah. One of the nice things with that is that if you think about, or if you can remember where the flagpole was, it was about as far away to the east. I mean, well beyond
Yeah.
even the field. You probably remember that graduation where they were having difficulty outside getting the flag up. But there's also a memorial plaque because the original donation of that flagpole was by a family of a young man who died in a car accident while I was at the high school here, but nobody ever saw that. So we are going to be repurposing that memorial plaque, and the flag's going to be right in the front entryway of the stadium, so it'll be much more visible for people, which would be very nice.
Anything else? If not, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, that was almost simultaneous. We'll go McGinnis, Hernandez. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank you, everybody.